The autumn breeze was crisp as it brushed the golden leaves across the quiet suburban streets of Alexandria, Virginia. Liliana Brooks stepped down from the city bus, tightening her scarf around her neck. She shivered slightly, the chill slipping into her worn-out jacket, a jacket she had bought second-hand 3 winters ago. Today was her first day working at the Johnson residence. Her hands, roughened from years of small jobs, waitressing, cleaning, assisting at corner stores, clutched the strap of her faded purse tightly. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears with every step toward the large, beautiful house at the end of the street. 2 stories, classic red brick walls, wide windows with ivory curtains. It looked like a house from a movie. Too perfect. Too far from the life she knew. Liliana paused at the iron gate, inhaling deeply. "It's just work," she whispered to herself. "Smile. Be polite. Do your job." She rang the bell. Within moments, the door opened. Standing before her was Malik Johnson. He was taller than she had imagined, perhaps 6'2", with a broad build. His skin was deep brown, his hair cropped close. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, yet carried himself with a dignity Liliana couldn't explain. "Assalamu alaikum," Malik greeted, his voice deep and calm. Liliana blinked, confused by the Arabic words. Before she could respond awkwardly, he smiled warmly and added, "Peace be upon you. You must be Liliana." "Yes, sir," she said quickly, her voice cracking slightly. "Malik, please." "No, sir, needed." He chuckled, stepping aside. "Come in." She stepped into the house, the smell of fresh linen and soft sandalwood filling her senses. The floors gleamed, the furniture was tasteful and simple. Nothing flashy. On the walls were framed verses in elegant Arabic calligraphy, and beside the door, a small wooden shelf held a neat row of shoes. "Would you mind taking your shoes off?" Malik asked gently. "It's a house rule." "Of course," Liliana said quickly, slipping off her battered sneakers. Malik led her through the house, explaining the duties. Basic cleaning, laundry assistance, occasional grocery runs. Nothing heavy. And no pressure to cook or serve, unless she felt comfortable trying. Liliana noticed the way he spoke. Respectful. Calm. Almost careful, as if ensuring she never felt small or inferior. "You'll find a prayer room upstairs," Malik said, pausing briefly. "If you ever need a quiet place to sit and breathe, you're welcome to use it too." She nodded politely, though she couldn't imagine needing a prayer room. Prayer felt distant from her life lately. As Malik returned to his home office, Liliana began her first task, cleaning the living room. She dusted the shelves and rearranged cushions. Her eyes wandered over the bookshelves filled with titles she had never seen before. "The Sealed Nectar, Biography of the Prophet Muhammad. Patience and Gratitude in Islam. Purification of the Heart." In between tasks, she found herself stealing glances at the quotes framed along the hallway. "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Qur'an 94:6. "Verily, Allah is with those who are patient." Qur'an 8:46. The words tugged at something deep inside her. Liliana had seen hardship. She was living it. But could there really be ease after all this? As she vacuumed the corner near the staircase, Malik passed by carrying a tray of tea. She glanced up shyly. "That's a lot of books about patience," she said, half joking. He smiled without missing a beat. "Life is all about patience," he replied. "And gratitude." Liliana forced a chuckle but looked away quickly, not sure how to respond. By the end of the day, her muscles ached, but her spirit felt strangely lighter. As she packed up her things at the door, Malik approached her with a plain white envelope. "Your first day's pay," he said simply. Liliana hesitated. "But I didn't even finish everything." "I mean, it's only been 6 hours." "And you work sincerely," Malik said, his voice firm yet kind. "We value sincerity more than hours here." She tucked the envelope into her purse, blinking hard against an unexpected sting of tears. As she walked down the path toward the street, she looked back once. Through the window, she saw Malik kneeling on a small rug, his forehead touching the ground in prayer. She stood there for a moment, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside her chest, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and something she couldn't name yet. Was this Islam? Was this peace? That night, as Liliana lay in her tiny apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, her mind wandered not to the stress of unpaid bills or to the coldness of the city, but to a man who knelt humbly, alone, in silent conversation with his Creator. And for the first time in a long time, Liliana Brooks whispered into the darkness, "God, if you're really there, show me the way." She didn't know that her prayer had already been heard, and that her life was about to change forever. The days that followed were quieter, smoother, almost strange in their peace. Liliana settled into her new routine at the Johnson house. Each morning, she would arrive promptly at 9, wearing her simple jeans and worn sneakers, hair pulled back in a messy bun. Malik would greet her with a polite nod or a warm, "Good morning," before disappearing into his home office upstairs. Their interactions remained brief, respectful. Yet, it was the little things that started to carve deep impressions into Liliana's heart. One chilly Tuesday, Liliana entered the living room to find Malik sitting on the floor, cross-legged, with an open book in his lap. A cup of untouched tea steamed beside him. He was so engrossed in his reading that he didn't notice her at first. Curious, Liliana leaned slightly to catch a glimpse of the title. The 40 Hadiths of Imam Nawawi. She didn't understand the meaning, but the sight of a young, successful man spending his afternoons studying faith instead of indulging in wealth or parties fascinated her. She had met plenty of rich men before, loud, boastful, always seeking attention. Malik was different. Calm. Content. What makes him so at peace? She wondered. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the guest room, Liliana heard the sound of Malik's voice floating through the hallway. Soft. Rhythmic. Almost like a song. She peeked from behind the door. Malik stood alone in the prayer room, reciting verses of the Qur'an. His voice was not loud, but it carried a depth, a weight that stirred something inside her. The words were in Arabic, foreign, beautiful. She didn't understand them, but somehow, they made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. Liliana quickly wiped her cheeks and returned to folding clothes. Get a grip, Liliana, she scolded herself. But the truth gnawed at her. She had never seen anyone pray like that. Not like a duty. Not like a show. But like a conversation between a soul and its creator. Later that week, a small accident broke the growing silence between them. While polishing the wooden shelves, Liliana's hand slipped and sent a glass vase crashing to the floor. Heart pounding, she dropped to her knees, picking up the shards frantically. I'm so sorry, she gasped as Malik hurried over. He knelt beside her, gently lifting her hand. A small line of blood traced across her palm. Without a word, he led her to the kitchen, rinsed the cut under warm water, and wrapped it carefully with a bandage. Liliana expected anger, scolding, maybe even deduction from her pay. But Malik just smiled softly. It's just a vase, he said. Your health is more important. Liliana stared at him, stunned. Nobody in her life had ever said something like that to her before. Not her employers. Not even her own family. That night, Liliana lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her cramped apartment. Malik's words echoed in her mind. Your health is more important. Tears welled up, unbidden. She had grown up feeling like a burden, something to be tolerated, corrected, hidden away. But in one small, unguarded moment, Malik had made her feel valuable. Not for her beauty. Not for her usefulness. But simply because she existed. Is this what real respect feels like? She wondered. Days passed, and small conversations blossomed between them. One morning, as she wiped down the kitchen counter, she mustered the courage to ask, Malik, can I ask you something? He looked up from his coffee, smiling patiently. Of course. Why do you pray 5 times a day? I mean, doesn't it get tiring? Malik chuckled softly. It's not about tiring the body. It's about resting the soul. Liliana blinked. I talk to God because I need Him. He continued, his voice low and sincere. Every blessing, every breath comes from Him. How can I not bow in gratitude? Liliana swallowed hard. No one had ever described prayer like that before. Not as a burden, but as a lifeline. One chilly Friday afternoon, Liliana noticed Malik dressing in a crisp white thobe, a traditional Muslim garment. His face shone with quiet excitement. Are you going somewhere special? She asked, trying to sound casual. Jummah, he said, buttoning the last cuff. Friday prayer. It's obligatory for Muslim men. He smiled at her puzzled expression. Friday prayer is like a weekly reset, he explained. It reminds us of what really matters. Liliana watched as he left, carrying nothing but a small prayer mat under his arm. No flashy jewelry. No designer suits. No ego. Just a man and his faith. And somehow, that image lodged itself in her heart like a seed waiting to bloom. Later that evening, Malik returned carrying grocery bags. Liliana offered to help him unload them. As she unpacked fresh vegetables and spices onto the kitchen counter, she noticed something odd. There were extra items: flour, rice, canned goods, more than one household would need. Expecting guests? She teased lightly. Malik smiled. No. It's for the food drive at the masjid. Every Friday, we gather supplies for families in need. Liliana's hands froze for a second. He wasn't just generous in words. He lived his kindness. That night, as she walked home under a sky full of stars, Liliana felt something shifting deep inside her. It wasn't love yet, not the kind sung about in songs or shown in movies. It was something quieter. Stronger. Admiration. Respect. And perhaps, the beginning of something even greater. Hope. Hope that there were still people in the world who lived with sincerity. Hope that maybe, just maybe, faith wasn't about rules and fear. It was about peace. And love. And dignity. As she entered her tiny apartment and pulled her jacket off, she found herself whispering again into the darkness. God, if this is your path, don't let me miss it. Outside, the cold wind howled through the streets. But inside Liliana's heart, the first flickers of warmth had already begun. The first snow of winter dusted the sidewalks in a soft blanket of white as Liliana Brooks walked carefully toward the Johnson residence. Each step crunched under her boots, the chilled air nipping at her cheeks. It had been 3 months since she first started working here. 3 months since her life had quietly, imperceptibly begun to change. Today, something inside her felt different. Not fear. Not confusion. But a deep, growing thirst. A need to understand. After completing her morning tasks, wiping down counters, arranging fresh flowers in the living room, Liliana found herself hesitating outside the library room door. On impulse, she gently pushed it open. Malik's private collection stared back at her. Rows and rows of carefully arranged books. On theology, philosophy, history. In the center shelf, a large copy of the Qur'an rested, wrapped carefully in a velvet cover. Liliana's fingers hovered over it. She knew it was wrong to touch without permission. But her curiosity burned. What secrets do you hold? She whispered to the book. Just then, Malik's voice interrupted her thoughts. You can read it if you like, he said gently. She jumped, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I wasn't. Malik chuckled softly. You don't have to apologize for seeking knowledge, Liliana. He stepped into the room, hands in his pockets. If you ever have questions, he said, meeting her gaze, you're always welcome to ask. Liliana swallowed. There was no pressure in his tone. Only invitation. Something inside her shifted. Maybe it was time to stop fearing what she didn't understand. Maybe it was time to start asking. That evening, after work, Liliana found herself sitting cross-legged on her mattress, her laptop glowing softly in the dim light. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard before typing. What is Islam? 1,000 articles flooded the screen. She clicked on one at random. Islam is the submission to the will of God. Muslims believe in one God, the same God worshipped by Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Liliana leaned closer, heart racing. Wait. Jesus? She had always been taught Muslims rejected Jesus. But article after article said otherwise. Muslims loved Jesus, honored him as a mighty prophet. They spoke of Mary with deep respect. Her chest tightened. Why didn't anyone ever tell me this? She thought bitterly. Tears blurred her vision as she scrolled further. Islam teaches that every soul will be judged by its deeds. Mercy is greater than wrath. Kindness to parents, orphans, and neighbors is a duty, not a choice. Liliana covered her mouth with her hand. These were the very values she had always believed deep down. But no one had ever explained them like this. Not her church. Not her teachers. Not her family. For the first time in years, the world made sense. The next morning, Malik noticed the change. Liliana's steps were lighter. Her eyes, though tired, sparkled with a quiet determination. As she dusted the windowsills, she turned suddenly and asked, Malik, why do Muslims cover their heads? He smiled warmly. Out of modesty and humility, he explained. To remind ourselves that beauty is not for the world's entertainment, but a gift from God, to be guarded. Liliana nodded slowly. The answer felt so pure. So far from the shallow, commercialized world she had grown up in. Later that week, she asked about prayer. Then about fasting. Then about charity. Each answer Malik gave wasn't just words, it was lived experience. She saw it in the way he treated strangers, greeted the delivery man, smiled at children, helped elderly neighbors shovel snow. Islam wasn't just his religion. It was his way of breathing. One evening, as a storm howled outside and snow pounded the windows, Liliana stayed late finishing laundry. Malik offered her a cup of warm tea before she left. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. A comfortable silence stretched between them. Liliana stared at her reflection in the tea, gathering courage. Malik, she said finally, voice trembling, have you ever doubted your faith? He looked up, eyes steady. Of course, he said. Doubt is part of the journey. It's how we grow. He leaned back, folding his hands calmly. But every time I doubted, I found more reasons to believe. Not because of blind faith, but because the more I searched, the more I realized the truth was always simple. There's one God. One Creator. And everything beautiful in this life points back to Him. Liliana's eyes burned. I want that certainty, she whispered inside herself. That night, as she trudged home through knee-deep snow, Liliana didn't curse the cold. She welcomed it. Each frozen breath felt like a baptism. She didn't know what her family would say, what her friends would think. But somewhere inside her soul, a tiny flame had been lit. Not by Malik's kindness alone. Not by his patience. But by the undeniable, powerful pull of truth itself. Liliana pulled her jacket tighter and lifted her face to the falling snow, letting it kiss her skin. For the first time, she wasn't running from life. She was running towards something. Something real. Something eternal. The coldness of January wrapped the city like a heavy blanket. Snow piled along the sidewalks, and the trees stood naked against the pale gray sky. Liliana Brooks stood in front of the small Islamic center in Alexandria, her hands trembling inside her pockets. The building wasn't large or grand, just a modest white structure with a blue dome peeking shyly from behind a row of oak trees. She had passed this place 100 times before without noticing. Today, it felt like the center of the universe. The past week had been a storm inside her heart. Liliana had read the Qur'an translations Malik had lent her. At first, cautiously. Then, hungrily. Each verse felt like it spoke directly to her soul. And whoever believes in Allah, He will guide his heart. Qur'an 64:11. Indeed, Allah is with those who fear Him and those who are doers of good. Qur'an 16:128. She had cried quietly the night she read about Mary. Maryam, honored above all women, pure and chosen by God. This is the truth. Her heart had whispered. This is what I have been searching for my entire life. But fear still clutched her. Fear of change. Fear of rejection. Fear of the unknown. Would her family ever understand? Would she lose her friends? Would she even recognize herself after this? But standing outside the masjid now, she realized something simple and clear. She had already changed. And God had already carried her this far. It was time. Inside, the masjid was quiet and warm. Soft carpets lined the floor, and the faint smell of clean wood and spice filled the air. A kind older woman wearing a navy blue hijab approached her, smiling warmly. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How can I help you? Liliana's throat tightened. I want to become Muslim, she whispered, barely able to hear her own voice. The woman's face lit up with joy, tears gathering in her eyes. Alhamdulillah. Come, sit. We will help you. Minutes later, Liliana sat cross-legged on the carpet, her heart pounding louder than any storm outside. A small group gathered, a few women, the imam of the masjid, and Malik. Yes, Malik was here. He stood quietly at the back of the room, not speaking, but his eyes glistened with emotion. Liliana met his gaze for a brief second, and he gave her a small, encouraging nod. It was all the courage she needed. The imam spoke softly, guiding her. You will say the testimony of faith, the Shahida. It means you bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Liliana's lips trembled. Slowly, carefully, she repeated. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. The moment the words left her mouth, Liliana felt it. A weight lifted from her shoulders. A warmth flooded her chest. It was as if she had been walking blind her entire life, and suddenly someone had pulled open the curtains, letting in the morning sun. Tears streamed down her cheeks uncontrollably. The women around her hugged her warmly, whispering, Mashallah, and welcome, sister. Malik stayed at a respectful distance, but Liliana saw the quiet pride in his eyes. Later, outside the masjid, the snow had stopped. The clouds had parted slightly, letting slivers of sunlight spill onto the glistening streets. Liliana pulled her coat tighter around her and breathed deeply, feeling the clean, sharp air fill her lungs. She turned to Malik, who waited a few steps behind. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Liliana smiled through her tears. I feel like I've finally come home, she whispered. Malik's face softened. That's because you have, he said simply. There was no need for grand speeches. No need for promises or declarations. Faith had already tied their hearts with a bond stronger than any word. That evening, back at her tiny apartment, Liliana sat cross-legged on the floor. In front of her was a new Qur'an, an English translation gifted by the sisters at the masjid. She ran her fingers lightly over the cover. No more running. No more fear. She was Muslim now. A servant of the one true God. A believer. And with belief came a peace she had never known before. Liliana's thoughts drifted to Malik. His patience. His kindness. His unwavering respect. She knew he had been a door. A door God had placed in her life to guide her, not force her. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. She whispered a prayer into the soft, glowing darkness. Allah, guide me to be strong. Guide me to live this new life with sincerity. And, if it is good for me, make my path with Malik easy. Outside, the city buzzed with life. But inside her small room, Liliana sat in perfect stillness, her heart beating with new light. She didn't know exactly what the future would hold. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. For the first time, she knew. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The sun poured golden light across the quiet streets of Alexandria, melting away the last patches of winter snow. Inside the Johnson residence, the air was filled with a different kind of warmth. The scent of fresh lilies, the soft hum of quiet excitement, the gentle rustle of new clothes being adjusted, final touches being made. Today was a day Malik Johnson never thought would come. And today, Liliana Brooks would step into a new chapter of her life not only as a Muslim, but as his wife. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. After Liliana's Shahida, life had shifted in beautiful, unexpected ways. She started attending beginners Islamic classes at the masjid. She practiced her prayers daily, sometimes fumbling, sometimes crying, but always trying. She learned to cover modestly, not because someone forced her, but because it made her feel honored, protected, loved by her Creator. And throughout it all, Malik remained patient, supportive, present yet distant enough to let her grow on her own. He never rushed her, never hinted at anything more than friendship and respect. But Liliana knew. She knew the connection between them had been blessed long before either of them realized it. One evening, under the soft light of the setting sun, Malik had spoken. They sat on the porch, sipping warm tea, watching as twilight kissed the horizon. I spoke to the Imam today, Malik said gently. Liliana turned to him, heart pounding. I told him. Malik paused, gathering courage, that if it's written by Allah, I would be honored to ask for your hand in marriage. Liliana's breath caught. Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. She nodded slowly, a trembling smile forming on her lips. I would be honored too, she whispered. No grand proposals. No diamond rings. No dramatic speeches. Just two souls, finding each other in the light of faith. Now, on this blessed morning, the small gathering inside the Johnson home prepared for a simple but sacred ceremony. The Imam arrived shortly before noon, carrying only a small Qur'an and a warm smile. Liliana wore a soft ivory gown, modest, flowing, elegant. A simple white scarf covered her golden hair, her cheeks flushed with shyness and happiness. Malik wore a traditional white thobe, looking more peaceful than ever. There were no crowds, no expensive decorations. Just a handful of close friends from the masjid, a few neighbors who had watched Malik grow up, and two of Liliana's new Muslim sisters who had embraced her like family. And above all, there was the invisible presence of the angels, witnessing this union written by Allah. The ceremony was simple. Liliana's heart raced as she sat quietly, hands trembling slightly in her lap. The Imam began with a few verses from the Qur'an, reminding them that marriage in Islam is a sacred covenant, a bond not just between two people, but between them and their Creator. He spoke of mercy, of patience, of love rooted in faith, not fleeting emotions. Then, the moment came. Malik stepped forward. The Imam asked him, Do you, Malik Johnson, accept Liliana Brooks as your wife according to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger? Malik's voice was steady, strong. I do, he said. Liliana's heart soared. Then it was her turn. The Imam turned to her, smiling warmly. And do you, Liliana Brooks, accept Malik Johnson as your husband according to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger? Her voice trembled, but her soul was firm. I do, she whispered. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Tears of relief. Tears of gratitude. Tears of joy so pure they could only have come from the depths of her newly awakened soul. After the nikah was completed, the gathering broke into soft applause and heartfelt congratulations. Malik approached her slowly, not rushing, not overwhelming. He offered his hand, careful, respectful, waiting. Liliana placed her hand gently in his. In that touch, there was a promise. Not just of love, but of partnership. Of striving toward Jannah, paradise, together. Alhamdulillah, Malik whispered, squeezing her hand gently. Liliana smiled through her tears. Alhamdulillah, she echoed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of laughter, hugs, and simple food shared with simple hearts. There were no fancy halls, no clinking champagne glasses. Just biryani, samosas, fruit platters, and plates filled with blessings. Malik and Liliana sat side by side, surrounded by warmth and prayer. And when the evening came and the guests left, they stood together under the velvet night sky, the stars glittering like diamonds above them. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Malik turned to her, voice thick with emotion. I never thought. He paused, searching for words. That Allah would bless me with someone who found faith before finding me. Liliana laughed softly, a sound like music. And I never thought, she replied, that love could lead me to faith. Malik smiled, a smile full of peace, full of hope. Or maybe, he said gently, faith led us both to love. They stood there, side by side, as the cold wind blew softly around them. And together they whispered a prayer into the night. O Allah, keep us firm. Keep us grateful. And make us among those you love. Somewhere, far beyond the clouds, beyond the limits of human sight, the prayer was heard. And a new dawn began, not just for Malik and Liliana, but for two souls, two believers, who had found in each other not perfection, but the greatest treasure of all: faith, forgiveness, and forever.